Picture this. It's 1969. Motown Records is at its peak. Smokey Robinson and Marvin Gaye are gods. The Jackson 5 are waiting in the wings. And in walks Diana Ross, not just another star, but the star. She doesn't shout. She doesn't fight. She doesn't throw punches. She just glides into the room, into the spotlight, into history. And if you're in her way, she doesn't push. She passes right by you, like you were never there. Diana Ross isn't your average diva story. She didn't build her career through tantrums or scandals. She built it through precision, calculation, and silence. But behind that velvet voice and polished image, a woman who knew exactly who stood in her way, and exactly how to make them vanish. She never needed a microphone to end a relationship, she just stopped calling. This episode, we're revealing 6 people who crossed Diana Ross and paid the price. From childhood friends who turned into bitter rivals, to music moguls who tried to mold her, to legends who challenged her crown. Get ready for betrayal, ambition, and a lesson in elegant revenge. Because Diana Ross didn't start drama, but when it came to holding a grudge, she finished it. Let's begin with the most painful cut of all, the best friend who couldn't stand the spotlight she helped create. It started with 3 girls and a dream. Detroit, 1959. The basement of the Brewster Douglas housing projects. Diana Ross, Mary Wilson, and Florence Ballard. They weren't superstars. They weren't divas. They were just teens with cheap microphones and voices full of hope. They called themselves the Primettes. And even in those early rehearsals, something was clear. Diana wasn't the loudest, but she was the one people turned to. She had the it factor, not just in voice, but in presence. She looked like a star before she ever became one. Mary Wilson, she noticed, and in those moments a seed of jealousy was planted. When Gordy signed them to Motown, he didn't just see a group, he saw her. Diana became the lead. Mary didn't argue, not at first. But the cracks started showing. Mary had grown up with Diana. They were best friends, confidants, co-dreamers. But suddenly Diana was getting solo lines, wearing better gowns, being interviewed solo. Her name moved to the front of the marquee, literally. Diana Ross and the Supremes. Mary once described that moment like watching her reflection vanish. She smiled through it, toured the world, accepted the applause, even if it wasn't for her, but behind the stage lights, tension brewed. Mary claimed Diana iced her out, wouldn't let her speak up during rehearsals, accused her of whispering to Gordy about pushing Florence Ballard out of the group, about keeping Mary in her place. And then Diana left. In 1970, just as the Supremes were peaking, she walked away to launch a solo career, to become a film star, to chase her own name in lights. Mary was left behind and furious. In her 1986 memoir, Dream Girl, My Life as a Supreme, Mary didn't hold back. She called Diana controlling, manipulative, dismissive, a woman who stepped on shoulders to climb. Diana never fired back. Not once. She didn't do interviews, didn't clap back in magazines. She just continued, head high, camera ready. They reunited briefly in 1983 for Motown's 25th anniversary. The smiles were staged. The air, ice cold. Backstage, Diana allegedly pushed Mary aside during the introduction, and the cameras caught it. The moment went viral, decades before viral was even a thing. Mary spoke out again in 2000 when a Supremes reunion was planned. She demanded equal billing, equal pay. Diana refused. The tour moved forward without her. When Mary passed away in 2021, Diana's response was dignified and distant. A single tweet, a photo, a short tribute. No interviews, no reunion, no grand gesture. Because some friendships don't end with fireworks, they end with silence. And Diana, she mastered that silence better than any ballad. But if you thought this sisterhood had tension, just wait until you hear what happened between Diana and the man who discovered her, then tried to control every part of her life. You don't build an empire without stepping on a few toes, and Gordy, he didn't just build Motown, he was Motown. Songwriter, producer, label boss, a man with taste, timing, and total control. And Diana Ross, she was his masterpiece. Berry discovered Diana as a teenager. He molded her voice, sculpted her image, curated her confidence. He didn't just sign the Supremes, he elevated her, He gave her ballads instead of pop fluff. He arranged photo shoots to make her look elegant, grown, untouchable. He put her in front of cameras, alone, before she even went solo. To the world, it was genius. But to Diana, it was suffocating. Behind the scenes, their relationship was personal and complicated. They were romantically involved for years. And at first, Diana saw him as her protector, her teacher, her guide. But over time, the praise turned into pressure, then into puppetry. Berry controlled everything: the songs she sang, the way she dressed, even how she smiled during interviews. He told her what to say, what not to say, who to trust, and most importantly, who not to become. Diana wanted to act, he resisted. She wanted to break into the mainstream pop scene. He doubted her. She wanted more than Motown. He wanted to keep her in it. In 1972, the real break happened. Diana signed a deal directly with MCA Records, arranged through Motown, but with far more independence. Her manager, no longer Berry, her producer, no longer just Motown, and her romantic relationship with Berry. Over, quietly, coldly. Berry didn't lash out publicly, he didn't ban her from the label, but the warm guidance turned to polite distance. In later years, when asked about Diana's departure, Berry called it inevitable, but sources close to him said he felt betrayed, like a father losing a daughter who no longer needed him. Diana, for her part, rarely spoke about their split. She never slammed him, she never aired dirty laundry. But when she took full creative control of her career and delivered chart-topping hits like Upside Down, she didn't thank Berry in interviews. She thanked herself. Years later, they reunited for celebrations, Motown anniversaries, Hall of Fame inductions. They hugged, they smiled, but the bond was never quite the same. She had outgrown her maker, and he had to watch his creation become untouchable. Because Diana Ross wasn't just Motown's leading lady, she became her own machine. And if you thought Gordy was intimidating, wait until you hear about the men who tried to protect Diana and ended up afraid of her instead. There's power, and then there's presence. Diana Ross didn't walk into a room. She floated into it, like the air bent itself around her. She didn't demand respect. She expected it. The way gravity expects you to stay grounded. And when you work for someone like that, you either level up or you disappear. In the late 1980s, Diana hired the Arias Brothers, a high-end security and logistics crew out of New York. They weren't just muscle, they were elite. They worked with royalty, diplomats, celebrities who couldn't afford a misstep. For Diana, image was everything. Her team had to be invisible, but perfect. At first, the Arias crew thought they had it locked down. They were early to rehearsals, cars warmed up, security tight, not a second wasted. But Diana didn't just want precision, she wanted presence management. Everything mattered. If her water bottle had a smudge on the label, it went in the trash. If a bodyguard adjusted his cuff while standing in her eyeline, he was repositioned. If a driver asked her, "How was your day?" that was overstepping. One of the brothers reportedly said, "She didn't yell, she didn't fire you, she'd just look at you like you didn't exist. And suddenly, you didn't." The moment that changed everything came during a Paris show in 1990. Thousands of fans, flashbulbs, press, a small miscommunication led to Diana exiting the venue before the motorcade had fully cleared. A surge of paparazzi surrounded her. No one got hurt, but Diana's expression said it all. She didn't scream, she didn't panic. She simply stepped back into the car, closed the door slowly and said, "This will never happen again." By morning, half the crew was gone. No emails, no explanation, just replacements. The message was clear: if you work in Diana's orbit, there is no room for error. To outsiders, it might have looked harsh, but to those who knew her, it was survival. She'd been burned too many times, ignored, underestimated, nearly silenced in the early days of Motown. So now, she ran her universe like a CEO in stilettos. One former staffer later said, "Diana didn't have bodyguards, she had stage managers for her life. Every movement had to match the brand, every gesture was a performance, and if your timing was off, you were out of the show." The Arias crew learned the hard way. This wasn't a pop star they were guarding. This was a cultural institution. You don't escort the Mona Lisa across a crowded street without knowing exactly how she'll catch the light. So when people called her a diva, Diana didn't flinch, because behind that reputation was a woman who knew the price of perfection and refused to accept anything less. But if her guards feared messing up a schedule, what happened when someone she loved like family started falling apart? Coming up next, the one person Diana tried to save and had to let go. She called him the little brother I never had. He called her mother, mentor, muse. For years, Diana Ross and Michael Jackson were inseparable, in public and in private. But even the strongest bonds don't always survive success, especially when that success starts to warp into something unrecognizable. Their connection began at Motown. Diana was already a star. Michael, just a child with a voice too big for his body. She introduced the Jackson 5 to the world in 1969 on national television. That moment launched them and sealed their bond. Diana nurtured Michael, taught him how to perform for cameras, how to walk, how to speak, how to command attention without saying a word. To him, she was elegance incarnate. To her, he was fragile brilliance. But as Michael's fame grew, from pop prodigy to global icon, the relationship shifted. Michael distanced himself. He surrounded himself with lawyers, handlers, image consultants. The boy she once tucked under her wing became a man too massive to reach. The turning point? Thriller, the album that changed music forever. Suddenly, Michael was no longer Diana's protégé. He was bigger than her, bigger than anyone. And with that spotlight came shadows. Plastic surgery rumors, tabloid scandals, whispers of pain he wouldn't talk about. Diana reached out, invited him to her Beverly Hills home, left voicemails, sent letters, but he rarely responded. Not out of spite, out of shame. He once told a friend, "Diana sees through everything, and I don't want her to see me like this." She was Grace, he was unraveling. Still, she defended him publicly. In interviews, she said, "Michael is misunderstood. He's kind, he's brilliant. I believe in him." But behind closed doors, it was different. When the first allegations surfaced in 1993, Diana was devastated. She refused to believe it, but she also refused to make excuses. She stayed silent. They saw each other rarely after that. He'd send her flowers, she'd send him notes, but the warmth was gone. And when he named her as a backup guardian to his children in his 2002 will, she was as surprised as the rest of the world. At his funeral in 2009, Diana didn't attend. She said she was mourning privately, but many believe she simply couldn't bear it. The boy she loved had become a stranger, and then he was gone. In a handwritten letter afterward, Diana wrote, "I've been trying to find the words. I loved him deeply and with all my heart." But the final chapter had already been written, in silence, distance, and heartbreak. Because sometimes hate isn't explosive. It's not anger. It's disappointment so deep, it turns to sorrow. And if you thought watching Michael drift was painful, wait until you hear about the time Diana tried to collaborate with another legend and clashed so hard they never shared a studio again. When giants meet, the world expects fireworks, but sometimes it just ends in smoke. Diana Ross, Quincy Jones, two legends, two perfectionists, one collaboration, that never truly happened. It was the early 80s. Diana had conquered pop, disco, and Hollywood. She was an Oscar-nominated actress, a platinum-selling solo artist, and a symbol of elegance. Quincy had just delivered Off the Wall with Michael Jackson and was already dreaming up Thriller. He was the hottest producer in the business. She was the ultimate vocalist with a point to prove. On paper, they were a perfect match. In the studio, disaster. The collaboration began with promise. Quincy admired Diana's poise, her phrasing, her vocal control. He envisioned an album that would fuse jazz, soul, and contemporary R&B, something timeless. Diana wanted something else. She wanted innovation. She wanted to lean into funk, into synths, into the new decade with both heels and high fashion. What she didn't want? To be controlled. Sources close to the sessions say the tension was immediate. Quincy gave notes. Diana didn't take them well. She wasn't rude, just dismissive. She'd smile, nod, and sing it her way anyway. He'd ask for another take. She'd say, "I think we got it." End of discussion. One studio engineer recalled, "It was like watching a chess match with no moves, just two people refusing to blink." The energy shifted. Instead of crafting something legendary, it became a standoff. Quincy, used to molding voices to fit his vision, grew frustrated. He liked creative pushback, but not blockades. Diana, used to total autonomy, wasn't about to be reshaped by a man, even one with Grammys piled to the ceiling. Eventually, the sessions were shelved. The music never saw the light of day. The tapes reportedly still exist, locked away in vaults, collecting dust. Both parties walked away saying little. No feuds, no press wars, no Twitter spats. Just silence, the kind that only happens between two titans who know they were never going to share the crown. In later years, Quincy praised Diana publicly, but never worked with her again. He called her one of the greats, but his tone was always measured. Diana, she never mentioned him in interviews again, not in retrospectives, not in memoirs, not even when asked directly. For fans, it's one of music's great what-ifs. What if Diana had surrendered the reins just once? What if Quincy had bent just slightly to her vision? We'll never know, because when two legends meet, they either make magic or they cancel each other out. And if Quincy Jones couldn't direct Diana in a studio, imagine what happened when Hollywood tried to mold her into something she wasn't, and rejected her the second she said no. For Diana Ross, music was never the limit. She wasn't just a singer with presence, she was a force with a story to act. And when she stepped into Hollywood, she didn't tiptoe. She arrived. Her very first film, Lady Sings the Blues, earned her an Academy Award nomination. Not Best Newcomer, Best Actress. She had never acted before, but critics called her unshakable. Roger Ebert wrote, "She doesn't play Billie Holiday, she becomes her." The world expected her to become the next great film icon, and Diana, she was ready. She didn't want to be typecast, didn't want to play the singer, the maid, the victim. She wanted complexity, power, depth. Hollywood wasn't ready. After Lady Sings the Blues, Diana had heat. She followed it up with Mahogany, then The Wiz. But neither captured that same spark. Then came the rejections. She lobbied hard for the lead role in The Bodyguard, the part that eventually went to Whitney Houston. She was considered for Dreamgirls, the role based partly on her own life. They cast Beyoncé instead. She pushed to play Dorothy Dandridge in a biopic. The studio passed. Over and over, the same pattern emerged. She's too glamorous. She's too polished. She's too Diana. Behind closed doors, casting agents whispered that she was difficult, that she had too much control, that she didn't audition well. Translation? She wouldn't shrink. Diana Ross had no interest in begging for roles. She didn't grovel. She didn't cry in casting rooms. She expected the offer to match her legacy, and when it didn't, she walked. Friends say she was heartbroken, not because she needed validation, but because she had more to give. Stories to tell, characters to inhabit. But Hollywood didn't know what to do with a black woman who wasn't trying to please. Years later, when asked about the roles she never played, Diana smiled softly and said, "I've had the career I was meant to have." But those close to her knew the truth. She kept every rejection letter, every passed-over part, filed away in a folder no one was allowed to touch. Some called it ego, others saw it for what it was, a quiet fire that never stopped burning. Because for Diana Ross, the biggest heartbreaks weren't public. They happened behind velvet curtains, in rooms where men in suits decided what kind of stories she was allowed to tell. And she never forgot it. But unlike others, she didn't fight for scraps. She built her own table, wrote her own legend, and when the spotlight didn't shine her way, she brought her own. But just when you think her silence is surrender, you realize Diana Ross never needed a comeback. She never left. Diana Ross never needed a war to prove her power. She didn't scream in interviews. She didn't clap back on talk shows. She never threw a shoe across a stage or posted a takedown on Instagram. Because Diana's weapon was silence. The people she froze out, the ones we've walked through tonight, they didn't get rage, they didn't get revenge, they got erased. Mary Wilson, her childhood sister turned bitter rival. Berry Gordy, her mentor who tried to shape her story. Bodyguards who slipped, collaborators who clashed. Legends she tried to love. Hollywood doors that never opened. They all got the same response. A calm stare, a quiet exit, a silence that screamed, Because Diana Ross didn't raise her voice, she raised the bar. She taught the world that being powerful doesn't mean being loud, that elegance can be armor, and that not every battle is worth the noise. To this day, you'll rarely hear Diana mention anyone by name. No exposés, no memoirs filled with venom, just stage lights, timeless records, and eyes that have seen it all. But don't get it twisted. Behind that perfect posture is a woman who remembers everything. Every slight, every name left off a call sheet, every no that should have been a yes. And her revenge? It wasn't in words, it was in legacy. 24 studio albums, over 100 million records sold, a career that's lasted longer than most people's lives. You don't have to like Diana Ross, you don't even have to understand her, but you will respect her, because even her enemies learned to whisper her name. Thanks for watching Legends Unfiltered, where icons get unmasked and reputations get rewritten. If you felt this one, if you saw the layers behind the lashes, if you respect a woman who rewrote the rules, then tap that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment below. Who should we unmask next? Because next time, we're digging even deeper. Another legend, another list, another story that's never been told like this. You just watched Diana Ross revealed the 6 people she hated. And something tells us she's still not done.